You wondering who will be diving into the stuffing less than 2 times? Or who will be eating more than 3 pieces of pie on Thanksgiving? Well, then you got to play the Pick 6 game from DraftKings. Your shot to turn a little cash into a lot. It's super simple to get started. First, download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, now available in Texas, California, and more. Then select between 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less than a certain stats, like yards or touchdowns, sacks, whatever. You choose if they're going to have more or less. And for the first time, Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5. You get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use the code BALLERS. That's the code BALLERS for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus bets awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offers. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
The DFS Studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Well, happy Thanksgiving. It's Tuesday, November 26th here on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew. He's got the keys to the Thanksgiving slate bets.
I got all the keys, brother. I am locked in for this 3-game slate. I know exactly who the random guy that nobody expects to be in the optimal lineup. I'm going to share that on today's show. I've already got the answers to the slate. So we're locked and loaded, baby. I'm excited, man. I love this slate. It's a little holiday for everybody here in DFS world. A 3-game slate where all eyes are on every game. You know, you get to late swap, you get to pivot around, certain things. It's like a perfect combination of, I think, game theory mixed with some, football takes. So it should be fun, man. I'm excited to break down this slate. I know that you are fully focused for Thanksgiving. You've got, nothing on your plate this week. You're just casually working a couple hours a day here and there. So you should have plenty of energy for us today.
You are going to spend more time with me than my family the next 2 or 3 days.
Not kidding, actually, though, which is funny.
Yeah, it's condensing what we do normally in a week, which usually takes us 5.5 days, to 3 days. That's really what Betz and that's the goal. That is the task at hand, the quest that I'm on every single year. And I don't know, for me, I live for weird schedules. Like, I'm totally fine adjusting myself for a couple of days. My family's not cool with it, but we have a crazy schedule this week for the Thanksgiving Day slate, which is in itself a DFS holiday. And then on top of that, the Megalodon show, which comes out on Wednesday, is an event. It's the 10th year we've been doing it. And for basically the 6th or 7th year in a row, it is what I get to pour my passion. And fun fact, we have some surprises in store for that episode.
Ooh, little teaser for the people. That's a pro tease there from the podcast host, Kyle Borganoni himself. Yes, man, this week it's crazy. Because like literally just last night we had football games, right? Monday Night Football. And now it's like, okay, we need to prep for 3 games for Thursday, but also we're trying to be quote unquote off Thursday. Like we should see our families at least for a half hour. But then, Friday I'll have some articles ready to go up. I'm recording Injury Blitz on Friday, and then we'll have best plays as usual for the main slate on Saturday. It'll come out for Sunday. So like, it's just not nonstop this week. So hat tip to you. Nobody works harder on the team than Kyle. And I know the Megalodon is going to be special this year. It always is. It's a great listen. And, it's an excuse to leave your family for 2 hours just to focus on this one show. I always love listening to it. It's fantastic.
The amount of legs that are numb across the country of just people saying, hold on, This episode's a little bit longer. I'm still sitting on the toilet. That's
honey, you've been in there for an hour and a half. Yep, almost done, sweetie. I'll be right there.
That's the metric that we really look for. And if you want to give some feedback, you can make sure that you give that. Just, want to make sure that you're there until you can't feel anything anymore in your legs. But I did want to mention at dfspass.com, we have an updated schedule for Thanksgiving. So if you're one of those people, you're kind of seeing things look a little different this week, we have it all updated for you for this 3-game slate. And then beyond that, after Thanksgiving, we will have the main slate for week 13. So you can get all of that at dfspass.com. Still half off. Still don't understand why, because over the last 4 weeks, I don't know if you knew this, Betz. I don't know if you've been in the know, but the DFS Pass is 35-5 when it comes to props that we posted. And I wrote down, is this correct? I went back through just to make sure we're not boosting numbers, we're not adjusting lines. 35-5 with our props over the last 4 weeks. So I had people, 4 weeks ago say, oh, that was a really good week. That's great. Talk to me next week. We had the next week where we had a great week. I think we were undefeated that one. And every single week I have people like, oh, I wish I would have gotten on. Like, well, I've had the same conversation. Give us an update of where we are, not just from the last 4 weeks, but as a whole for the DFS Pass, because I feel really proud that this is something that you and I have worked on together. You've put even more energy than myself, but I feel super excited to tell people where we're at so far going into week 13.
Yeah, heading into week 13, we are 75-35 on the year, is the record, plus 28, just over 28 units on the year. So it's wild, man. It's been a really fun month. I know a lot of people are parlaying these, and they're turning $5 into hundreds of dollars.
That's wild.
Somebody turned $20 this past weekend into over 5,000 parlaying some of these. We say it on the show every week. We do not expect to win 80-90% of our bets. It's just not realistic. So I would, again, caution, keep your bankroll management skills in check. That's a huge important part of being a DFS player, a sports bettor. That does not need to go out the window just because of the success we had. There will be a losing week at some point in the near future. Let's hope it's not this week, but I just want to put it out there. This cannot sustain.
We also don't personally parlay our thing. I don't do that.
No, I don't either.
So to see people to have success is great. It's just not the strategy that we employ, but maybe I should. Maybe I should be parlaying my house on some of these things.
I mean, in hindsight, if you would have done that, you'd have a mansion by now.
And I don't, but I am very thankful what I have. But anyway, it's been a really good run. Hopefully you've had some good community and good conversations in our Discord channel if you're one of those people that have the props or DFS channels. So we really appreciate you guys. Grateful for all your feedback. So we'll talk about the Thanksgiving slate. And then at the very end, Betz and I are going to do what we used to call Battle Royale. We used to do that every single week where Betz and I would go back and forth. We are going to build a Thanksgiving Day lineup against each other, and the winner gets a Don Julio margarita courtesy of Chili's. Last year, I somehow squeaked it out. I look back, I think I won by 3 points or whatever. But more than just a $10 marg, which is high-end stuff. I don't know if you remember. High-end clientele.
I'm aware.
It's the bragging rights.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. We'll share our lineup today. You all will be able to root for your favorite host of this show on Thursday. And, what's funny is Kyle told me before the show started who his quarterback is. He had to pivot because we got some injury news. So we're going to talk about that today, but I cannot believe this man was going to risk, I won't root for Kyle, but he was going to risk Tommy Cutlets at quarterback. He was going to put Tommy Cutlets in to try to win a margarita. I mean, Kyle, you are absolutely sick out of your mind. Let's talk about the slate.
State of the main slate.
See, the thing is, I'm fine going into a street fight against you with Tommy D right next to me. Just me at the front lines with our, very much so me and my Italian brother, Tommy, that we are so close. Somebody I've always talked up as very close to me in a Anchorman style street brawl. I'm ready for Tommy. Now he's not in my lineup. Can't do it.
Yeah, let's talk about that when we get to the quarterbacks here on the slate.
Okay, so we wanted to give some general Thanksgiving strategy because we do have to approach this a little differently than how we normally talk about cash slates. Just so you know, Betz and I will mostly be talking about this from a tournament perspective. We find that there isn't really an edge in playing cash. You can do it. I'll probably create a couple of lineups for cash just to say like, hey, here's how I think the slate is going to be, and here's how I think I can have an edge of how just Joe Schmo is building his lineup. But it's not where we're putting most of our focus on this episode, and it's not where I put my bankroll. This is like a holiday for us. So any quick thoughts about how we allocate our bankroll and how we play personally?
Yeah, I just think to speak to like the cash versus tournament perspective on these small slates, the smaller the player pool, the less edge there is in terms of being able to identify, the quote unquote like best games. If you're playing double ups this week, you are going to have a ton of overlap with the best plays on the slate. So just thinking about like the Lions running backs and Amon-Ra and CD, like those guys are going to push, 70% in double up, something like that. So you're going to be holding hands with a lot of the field in a lot of those contests. So I would say if you are going to play cash, I'd prefer personally to play more head-to-head than double ups for that reason. And like we talked about, kind of just briefly at the intro, there is a lot of game theory to this in terms of, how many players you need from each game. And do you really want to go all in on one game in the hope that one goes bonkers? Do you fade certain game environments, like that kind of thing? There's a late swap, kind of advantage to this in tournaments. So it's really hard to play cash when the slate is so small, when the best plays are so obvious. So that's why we don't play as much cash, but I lean into this more for the tournament aspect of it. And kind of like I said, the game theory aspect of it, because when you only have 3 games to pick from, you can get a little bit different and off the board with some of your takes and your exposures. For example, like usually I wouldn't want to play, 2 running backs from the same team, but what if the Lions put up 40 and both Gibbs and Monty just roll? That's possible, right? Or usually we say, I don't really want to stack my running back often with my quarterback in most scenarios. You don't think about like Jared Goff and David Montgomery correlating, but what if, again, the Lions are just the team you need and that makes sense? So same thing goes with like defense. Like defense rules should just get super loose on the slate. You can play players against your defense. So you need to be willing to get off the board a little bit from your kind of usual like optimizer settings and your usual tournament lineup settings for this slate. There's lots to think about for sure.
When you start to think about roster percentages and ownership, it gets condensed and you kind of see the hive mind of people saying like, this guy's going to be a good play. So we'll get to that in just a second when we talk about salary standouts. But, whatever we're used to talking about in roster percentages of like, oh, this player is going to be played by 30% of the field. If you're playing in the Millie Maker, you're going to see guys that are above that 50% mark. they're hitting 40, 50% as this guy's going to be a locked in play. Like last year, for instance, in the Millie Maker, CMC was at 62%, CeeDee Lamb was 60%. So you're going to see a lot of plays kind of condensed. And I have some of those historical numbers if you want to look back in the First Look article about how people distribute their salary. I will say that my first glance at this is it's one of those slates where you go, man, the running backs project really, really well. There's about 3 or 4 of them that you and I are going to be interested in. And so you're going to see a lot of builds that have that 3 running back set up. I like that. It projects really well from a median standpoint, but we understand that wide receivers do have a ceiling on DraftKings with the full PPR and the bonus that you can get there and get a little different than what the rest of the field is doing. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind the game that we're playing and how we're stacking. It just looks a little different. And I will just say for me, I try to just look at, like, there's 6 quarterbacks. I'm just going to pick my favorite 2 quarterbacks and just stack around that and not try to get to cover all my bases. You can't do it, people. Trust me, like, you're not going to be able to get through every single combination you can think of. So it's more about opportunity costs. I'm going to pick 2 quarterbacks, build around them, and then you identify a couple places that you can have leverage on the field. I got to give you credit. Last year, you were the person on this podcast that said Curtis Samuel is one of those plays that I'm going to have over the field. He went for 100 yards, hit that bonus right on the dot, and I actually did really well last Thanksgiving because of that, because of you. So it's just finding a couple of those players. Maybe you said you have that player this year.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready to let people know. I forgot about Dirty Curtis. Yeah, he almost won you the Millie, wasn't it?
Yes, I was cooking for a while, and then the night game, I believe the night game kind of like brought me down just a little bit.
Yeah, I think you had like a Debo versus CMC situation, and I think you ended up losing on that one. But yeah, that was a fun call last year. Dirty Curtis. There's going to be a random guy that pops up that you're like, didn't see that one coming, and that's kind of why we embrace the highs and lows of this slate from a tournament perspective.
All right, let's get into these salaries.
Salary standouts.
So we're just going to go position by position, and in just a second, we'll walk through the game. So not all of our analysis, but just quick takes of what you think the field is going to do. At quarterback, it's relatively cheap. So when you start stacking up options this week in your lineups, you go, oh, this is a little different than how we've been doing with Jared Goff and Jordan Love being the top priced options at only $6,500 and $6,300. I feel like Love and Goff are going to be the safest as home favorites. You're going to get the narrative about Tua in a cold weather game, which we'll talk about that game too. Caleb Williams is cheap, and we've seen him run the ball more recently. So he's going to project kind of well at 5,300. And then you have Rush and DeVito down at the bottom. But any early quarterback takes on just how the group stands out?
Yeah, like you talked about, everybody's relatively cheap. I mean, obviously, this is a Slate-specific situation where like Goff is the quarterback one, DeVito and Locke are very, very cheap. But when you think about like the rest of the roster with running backs and wide receivers, there's a couple of standout plays at wide receiver that people are obviously excited to play with, CD and Amon-Ra, Neighbors. And then when you look at like running backs, it's like, okay, we got HM, we got both Detroit guys, Josh Jacobs looks good, all of these options. And I think what people are going to do for the kind of the quote unquote like cash builds is probably drop down to like the middle tier. I think Caleb might actually be the most rostered on this slate just because he's 5,300. He's barely more expensive than Cooper Rush, who's not really running. We'll talk about the Giants situation here in a minute. And like I said, the Tua cold weather thing that we'll talk about more in detail in that game. But just Caleb in that spot makes sense in the dome. 10-point underdogs. Like, I think you can tell yourself a story where he's forced to drop back a ton in this spot. And we've seen the offense just look a lot better in the last 2 weeks with the OC change. So I think Caleb is kind of the best price adjusted play on the slate. Doesn't mean he's the optimal quarterback play, but I think when people are building for cash games, I think Caleb Williams might be the most rostered.
Yeah, Goff and Love have such a high floor if you just look at the team and the team implied total, but both of those teams want to run the ball when they're ahead, and they have massive advantages on their offensive line. So that's the only pause I have. Like, we've had slates on Thanksgiving, we have Josh Allen, or we had Dak Prescott last year, where it's like, oh, you could play these guys, and you see a ceiling case. Like, you could win this slate with 16 points from your quarterback.
For sure.
It's like, it's definitely one of those that I feel like I'm not building first with quarterback in mind. I'm kind of looking at the other plays and kind of seeing where I can stack up. Part of this is figuring out which game's going to go off so that you can have three pieces from it and you're not just mixing and matching. Like, think about roster percentage. If you're just kind of distributing yourself through all three games, you're like, oh, I want to make sure I have a piece in every game. You're not creating any leverage on the field. So it's kind of figuring out, is it a Love double stack? Is it Caleb and you're stacking him with two options where it feels dicey on the road? So those are the kind of things we think about. At running back, I mean, there's four dudes really, that are just projecting awesome. And their floors are high. So Achane at 7,700, Gibbs at 7,500, Josh Jacobs coming off 100 yards, 3 touchdowns at 7K, and then Montgomery, we'll have to wait and see with him, but 6,500, he's going to project well. However, I think the most popular running back that you're going to see this week is Rico Dowdle. He's going to be 1 or 2 in my opinion. And it's a price thing. It's a matchup thing. I don't know. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I think Dowdle's, it's so funny. Like, on a main slate, Dowdle would never be like the cover boy of like cash games and the guy you play.
Never make our pool.
But the Giants are dead last in yards per carry allowed. They're at home. They're favored. I wrote this up in Pace of Play. It's like there's not many spots on the schedule that you can point to and be like, oh, Dallas can actually lean on their run game this week. This feels like a good spot to do it. So yeah, I think Dowdle is going to be the most popular. It's just a comfy click at 5,500. I mean, he's basically the cheapest starting running back on the slate. And, he's coming off a game where he touched the ball a ton. The Zeke thing is pretty much over, thank goodness. So I think Dowdle's a pretty good play from a median projection. We'll talk about it from a game theory, how do you handle it in tournaments? But I think for cash games, price adjusted, Dowdle does look very, very strong this week. Yeah.
Jacobs and Achane and Gibbs feels like a three-sided coin flip. Like, if you had to ask me, I'm like, I could see all three of them. I mean, if Gibbs is going to be super popular, if we knew that Montgomery's out or limited or one of those things, but you can make the case for all three of those guys. So running back's really strong this week. Like, I see the route for at least 4 or 5 guys, and you're going to see a lot of 3 running back builds. Did want to throw out Roshan Johnson, who's 4,500, has as many touchdowns inside the 5 as Joe Mixon this year. So they like him in close. He's a big dude. And other than that, there's not really any other value plays that you want to look at. At wide receiver, it's Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, and then I don't know if you saw this, Betz, but Tyreek Hill is 6,900.
Buttlicker, our prices have never been lower.
I scrolled back, and I just got tired of doing it because I think this is the lowest price for Tyreek in like 4 or 5 years.
I mean, it's hard to argue with it. This is Jonnu's team, Kyle. So, yeah, it's so funny how what you think about a player in the season and how a player is going to be used can just flip on a dime throughout the year, and you're like, okay, didn't see that one coming. Yeah, I mean, the numbers are what they are, right? Like, he's tied with Jonnu for like first read target share for the last, month or whatever. So I get it. I am interested in attacking Tyreek from a tournament perspective if the field is not going to play him and they're worried about it and worried about the recency situation with Jonnu. But I do think for cash games, he's probably not in the top tier for me, just with kind of the potential concerns with Tua on the road. You get both Neighbors and Lamb and Amon-Ra, all those guys playing in a dome with just unreal target shares. I think those are obviously the top plays on the slate. They are adjusted for that with price. But I do think for cash games, you want at least one of those top 3 guys. And then there's a ton of interesting plays in the mid-range. All 3 Bears guys are kind of relatively undervalued if you think Caleb can have a good game this week. The Packers route share should condense to Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, and Jaden Reed with Romeo Doubs out this week. So there's a lot of ways that you can play it. I think that's kind of the key on the slate is like below 6K, who is going to be the difference maker at wide receiver, because there's plenty of guys in there. And from a median projection standpoint, I don't think there's a ton separating them, which makes it fun for tournaments because you can kind of identify when we get a roster percentage report where we think the field is going to go. And I'll personally be using that to try to find who in this range am I going to find to pivot off of the field.
Yeah, I can see Keenan Allen being a safe play on PPR just based on what he's done the last couple of weeks, which makes me smile.
Carrying the big dog team, baby. That's our boy.
Dude, our big dog team didn't even have a quarterback this week.
Oh, the Purdy injury was not good for us. Not good, but I had to laugh when Keenan literally has done nothing the entire season. All of a sudden pops up for a massive game last week. I texted Kyle. I was like, dude, Keenan is putting the big dog team on his back. Let's go.
Dude, we have Addison on that team too.
We got a good team, man. We're peaking late. We just need to get Purdy healthy.
We're okay. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be a very popular play at 7,300. Normally, we would look at a slate and say, okay, this price is cheap for CeeDee Lamb. His target share is great, but what's the ceiling outcome? But on a 3-game slate, we actually don't always have to look into ceiling outcome. We just look at raw points and say, here's what he's doing with Cooper Rush. And if I knew I was getting 15 points from CeeDee Lamb, there's not a lot of guys that you can feel comfortable with that. Let's say he finally catches a touchdown. It does look good. This also is his cheapest price from 2 Thanksgivings ago.
Buttlicker, our prices have never been lower.
Yeah, I got to use the drop twice. It's low prices, man. Would you say as a whole, looking at salaries, it's not an expensive slate? I mean, it's Amon-Ra, it's the running backs, but like overall, it's like you can fit in a couple of studs.
Yeah, pricing's pretty loose. And, because of the Dobbs injury, like you get Wicks pretty cheap that people are okay playing potentially as like a wide receiver, air quotes here, punt option. There's cheap tight ends that I think people might play again. So it's pretty loose. You can get up to a couple of the studs on the slate if you want to, which DraftKings and FanDuel normally do to try to encourage casual people to play on the slate. So it just makes it more fun to build. I like it this way. And it gives you a lot of options in terms of how you want to build. So yeah, I think pricing is pretty loose. You can pretty much do what you want. Obviously you can't spend on every single stud, but you can fit a couple.
Yeah, tight end is pretty cheap. I mean, who knew Jonnu Smith would be the tight end one when we had this Thanksgiving slate circled, but he's 4,300, Laporta's 4,100, and then we still have to figure out the Cowboys situation. If it's the Schoon man again this week, he did go up in price, $900, but yeah, there's a lot of cheap options here. We're not having to spend up at all. And then at defense, I mean, I like 3-4 options at defense. Like, I don't think it's going to get crazy out of control. The Cowboys had a big week. You're not going to be able to repeat a, special teams touchdown return and then one that, what was it, the end of the game where they got to return the onside kick. Like, you're not getting that, but you are getting against Tommy DeVito, who's a sack king. And then you get the Lions at home against Caleb Williams. Like, those those guys are expensive, and we normally would say, like, I'm not paying $3,500 for the Lions. But on this slate, like, I can fit in those expensive defenses.
For sure. And I think those two, the Lions and Cowboys, I mean, it's obviously not surprising. They're the best players on the slate at defense. You think about Caleb Williams as a 10-point underdog on the road. You think about Tommy DeVito and or Drew Lock. By the way, both starting tackles were on the injury report this week as well for the Giants on the road against the Cowboys, who, the Cowboys defense has been abysmal this year, but like they still have Micah Parsons. They can rush the passer. They're the best players on the slate. I think both are in play for cash. I would definitely play one of the two if I was playing cash games. I do think there's some ways you can kind of think about it for tournaments, which we'll talk about. But yes, the Lions and Cowboys are going to be massive, massive chalk this week.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk about these games. Let's jump in.
Stack Attack.
We're going to break down all three of these games, and at the end, we'll build a lineup against one another. The first game is the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions. The Lions are 10.5-point home favorites. The over-under is 48.5. And did you know that Jared Goff, as a Lions starting quarterback on Thanksgiving, has as many wins as you and I?
Jared, buddy, get it together, man. You're playing on Thanksgiving every single year with Detroit. You got to get a W this week. Now, we do have some data that, teams favored by at least 10 points are winning over 80% of the time in the NFL. So I'm going to go out on a limb this week, and I'm going to say the Lions finally get Jared Goff his first Thanksgiving win.
You are wild, my friend. You're telling the people right now, this is the stone cold lock of the week. Lions 10.5.
I actually think the line is fair, and I saw some early money on the Bears. I've seen this at 10 in a couple spots, so I'm not betting the spread because I imagine never doing that. But I do think that I do think this game could be one of those, like, the Lions get out to a big lead and Chicago kind of backdoors it sort of situation. So I think the spread is right. I'm very interested to see what you want to do with the Bears side of this thing, because I mentioned I think Caleb's probably the most popular quote-unquote cash game quarterback. So how are you stacking him? Are you fading him? I know you were a little worried about Anthony Richardson last week in this matchup. Largely that worked. I will say, if you played A-Rich in cash last week, which I did, man, that hurt. A couple plays called back from penalty. Tight end drops it on the goal line. Like, it could have been a much better fantasy day for A-Rich. That said, this Lions defense is no joke.
I was sniffing my own farts on Sunday when I was looking at that game.
Just that part.
Because we really should. Because, okay, people, I all the time, we're weighing a couple of things. We're weighing our football takes, weighing the numbers, the spreadsheets, and then just generally what the field's going to do. And sometimes I feel so split about those things. Last week, I think Anthony Richardson was the right play based on what the field was going to do. He was like 40% in double ups.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where normally I would just go, if the field's going to do this, I think he's a pretty good play. I could be wrong about the matchup. You just play him. Same thing with Caleb. I think he's going to be popular this week. This is a terrible matchup for his skill set because Detroit plays a ton of man coverage. And we pointed out last week, inaccurate throwers like he's been, like Anthony Richardson, who also try to extend plays with their legs, are just terrible against this defense. So I do have some bias. I'm bringing that up right now, that the offense is kind of shifted too. We think of Caleb Williams as like down the field stuff. Richardson is down the field stuff. He missed Alec Pierce on one of those, but Caleb's been short recently. It's just a bunch of short stuff with Thomas Brown as the new OC. That yak stuff, man, if you're not getting these big plays and you haven't seen them from DJ Moore a lot from these yak plays this year, it's just an inept offense on overall. So that's my initial football guy, hand in the dirt take, is that this is a poor matchup for Caleb.
I mostly agree with that. And it's kind of a push and pull. Like, Detroit has faced the fourth highest deep throw rate in the league, yet Caleb's ADOT with the new OC is non-existent, right? Everything is short. It's quick hitters to DJ Moore, get the ball out quick. They're running more, and you can't run on the line. So it kind of sets up poorly for the Bears in general. You would think as a 10-point underdog here, they're not going to try to run into the teeth of the Lions defense. But coaches do irrational things all the time, so who knows? I will say my general feeling on the Bears from a tournament perspective is if the field is going to play Caleb as the best salary-adjusted play on the slate, I would like to come in underweight that and lean into the spread and say, I mean, what if the Lions just throttle them here? I mean, they just embarrassed, the Jaguars a couple weeks ago. Yes, the Bears are better than the Jaguars, but it's worth pointing out the Cowboys have a higher team total on the slate than the Bears do. So if the field is going to just jam in Caleb doubles because it's cheap and comfy, I mean, DJ Moore is cheap, 5,600, Keenan 5,100, Rome 5K, Cole Kmet 3,600. Like, you can make a double or a triple stack work really easily. My lean is for tournaments is to try to come in underweight that, just because this Lions defense has been so good. They're at home, massive favorites. And if they can get out to a lead, assuming Monty is healthy and we know Gibbs is healthy, if both those guys are healthy, I think you could see, 30 to 35 total running back touches in this game pretty easily, which will milk the clock and drain play volume there. So my general take is lower than the market on the Bears in the spot.
Yeah, that's exactly how I'm probably going to approach it. I mean, Detroit is number 1 in the NFL in EPA per pass attempt, and they've yet to allow a quarterback to throw for more than 1 touchdown in a game. I mean, that's crazy. Like, we haven't seen a multi-touchdown game through the air. You need that on this slate from Caleb Williams. And if he's going to be this popular, you gain a ton of leverage. Saying all that, there is a route where you kind of get this backdoor route of the Lions kicking butt, and then you get some dirty garbage time stuff where Caleb Williams volumes his way to 300-yard bonus, and 1 or 2 of his receivers get there, and he's the optimal play. So you can play that route. That's the only route that I see for Caleb in this game. And I'm not playing Swift, who's been super inefficient. Roshan's a fun factoid, but I'm not playing him either. He can't, he's not going to get more than 10 touches in the game. So it kind of comes down to the order of the wide receivers for the Bears, and courtesy of Jared Smola of Draft Sharks. Leading the Bears in first read target share under new OC Thomas Brown over the last 2 games, Keenan freaking Allen at 34% of the first read targets. He's a comfy play in full PPR at this. I totally know that there's bias here, and I love Keenan Allen, but Detroit's area you've kind of gone to them is the slot. So I think Keenan Allen's a good play at his price. I'm not saying he has a crazy ceiling or anything.
For sure, yeah. Detroit has faced, I think it's the 4th highest slot target share this year. So I think there's probably a path where Keenan gives you a pretty good game. Maybe on the slate that's good enough. It's only 3 games. You don't need a ceiling performance from everybody in your lineup. So I think he's fine. It's just these like aging veterans that have a good game, and then all of a sudden the next week they're going to be really popular. It just feels dirty to go after him in that situation. So
don't talk down to Keenan.
I know, man. We need him for big dog, right? So this is going to be a hedge for me.
Still on that team.
That's a great team. I think he's fine. I do question the true ceiling here, but I think he's fine. My personal take, though, for the Lions side of this is when you think about the matchup, opponents recently against Chicago are running like crazy. Like, they faced one of the lowest PROEs on the year. You would think as a 10-point home favorite, they should just feed the running back duo in this spot. So I love both running backs. I might personally set a rule just saying I want to bet on this team. They've got the highest team total on the slate. The touchdown upside for these guys is massive. I haven't decided yet. I might just play all lineups at least with one Detroit running back and kind of let the chips fall where they may elsewhere. It's such a simple take, but it feels like an easy spot to go to given how good the matchup is, given the team total, given the home environment here.
The offensive line of the Lions and the defensive line of the Bears is the biggest mismatch on this entire slate. So keep that in mind when you're building. Keep in mind that the Giants are dead last in adjusted yards before contact. So to me, I think Gibbs is a smash play, and he's been awesome all year. But I did some research, and I won't go through all the numbers, but in the First Look article, I figured out, like, okay, what do these two need to do at their price point? How often have they done it this year combined? And what do they need to do on this slate? And this year, if you needed 30 combined points, which, I don't know, on a small slate, it's totally possible. If you only got 30 points from these guys, they've done that in 9 of 11 games together. That's a crazy rate for 2 running backs. You've also seen them hit 35 and 40 a couple of times too. So you can play both of them together, which is something we would never say. I might set the same rule, but I also think the field might be doing it too, of just playing the running backs. What do you think about Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams, which Jamo's been a guy that we've talked up a little bit more recently, and he's been awesome at home. Did you see his home splits this year?
I have not.
He's averaging 101 receiving yards per game at home.
Makes sense. I mean, Goff rolls at home. The offense rolls
Yeah.
at home. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that he's interesting. They play a lot of single high safety looks, and so you get the big plays here. I don't think he's going to get out of control with roster percentage because there's just so many other guys in the Packers game. You're like, oh, I want Reed or I want a cheap Wicks. There's just lots of other options here. So I don't think Jamo's going to get out of control. Amon-Ra is just consistent all the way through. It's expensive on this slate, but probably not expensive enough considering how high his floor is in full PPR. So I'm probably just going to meet the field at those two guys.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. We talked about how good the matchup is for the running backs here. Quietly, on the season entering the year, we all said the Bears are a great pass defense. They're tough to throw against. They've got Jalen Johnson. Like they're really strong. All that is mostly true, but in recent weeks, they have struggled massively. I'm trying to pull up my numbers here. They are 20th in EPA per play against the pass in the last 4 games. So you can throw in Chicago, and if the field just assumes it's a bad matchup, I don't mind in separate lineups saying, okay, the field's going to play the running backs. I might just say, here's a leverage point. I'll play Goff with Amon-Ra and Laporta or Tim Patrick or whatever, and just kind of throw some darts there. Or just play Goff with the running backs and say, look, if there's a team that's going to put up 40 on the slate, I'm pretty sure it's the Lions. and I don't think that combination is going to be as rostered as it could be. The Lions are interesting, right? Because like last week, they had an opportunity to just go for it against the Colts and do the same thing they did 2 weeks ago against the Jaguars. But they kind of took their foot off the gas and played it easy. So I don't know what they're going to do. But if people aren't going to play Goff at the same rate as like Caleb or the other quarterbacks, I'm happy to find out, in tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, Monty was hurt in the second half, so that you could see them kind of let up and kind of figure like, hey, we got this game under control. I'm interested in overstacking the Lions side like we saw a couple weeks ago, where you have four guys from this and you pick one Bear, or even crazier, let's just say you think none of the Bears get there. That's totally fine. You also can stack up the Lions side and play their defense. It's not an either or situation. So I like this a lot. Amon-Ra is just wild because he leads the entire NFL in 10-zone receptions, 10-zone touchdowns, and that's really hurt Laporta. So it's rare for a PPR wide receiver to also be the red zone guy. That's probably going to eventually come back to Laporta, and on DK, he's cheap. And I bet people aren't going to play him as much as they should. So I don't mind Laporta at all. I don't really have a ton of interest in Kmet here. I mean, last week it was just garbage time stuff, but if you have a garbage time Caleb build, then you can bring it back with him. But any last thoughts on this game?
Did want to note, Thanksgiving Day hero, unfortunately, Cleve Raymond is going to miss this game.
I know.
You've been talking about him for like 2 weeks. You're like, Cleve Raymond on Thanksgiving, man, that's going to be the play. Yeah, he's going to miss this game with a foot injury. So I do think Tim Patrick is very, very interesting. He's 3,500 on DraftKings. He's super cheap, and I'm pretty sure the 3 wide receiver set is going to be consistently Amon-Ra, Jamo, and Tim Patrick. And Tim Patrick is quietly a pretty good football player. Like, he earns targets at a decent clip. I would be surprised if Jalen Johnson's on Tim Patrick. Like, I don't think they're gonna focus on him in the game plan. So Tim Patrick is kind of like my favorite like sneaky dart throw in this game. Obviously, you shouldn't be surprised if he gives you like 1 or 2 catches, but if the build this week that you need is a punt play and some studs, I think Tim Patrick is very interesting.
Yeah, Tim Patrick's going to be the player that catches like a 40-yard bomb in like the first quarter, and everybody messages their friends or in Discord or on Twitter or wherever. And it's like, look how much Tim Patrick I have. It's kind of like what we used to do with Josh Reynolds.
Dude, Josh Reynolds, man, that guy just gets it done, or used to get it done.
On Thanksgiving, he definitely would like get it done early. So give me your Vegas take.
I will take Detroit team total, and from a DFS perspective, I just want to lean into Detroit onslaughts. So like you said, 2-3 guys, maybe 4, include the defense and say, look, if the field's playing Caleb at the highest rate, what if he fails?
Yeah, I'm same thing. I mentioned earlier that I'm just terrified of this matchup for Caleb. And if you want to build some backdoor garbage time stuff, that's totally fine. But I think the Lions roll in this game. Next one we're going to talk about is the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. The line right now is Dallas -4. The over-under is 37.5. This is not really the matchup we thought before the year of Tommy Cutlets versus Cooper Rush or maybe Drew Lock or whoever else out there. We do have some good wide receivers that we get to look at, Malik Neighbors and CeeDee Lamb. but this game total is super low. And the most popular play in this game is going to be Rico and then CeeDee. So it feels like from the outset, I'm looking at this game and I'm like, okay, the field already knows what's going to happen. I understand why they're going to play it this way. So do I want to just like say, okay, Rico, I'm just going to meet the field. I get it. I get why he's a good play. I don't want to get buried by getting too cute, but I don't think he's great at the game, but he's 5,500. And so we don't really care. So what's your early take on the game flow?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, when you think about Dallas, like they've still played pretty fast, even with Cooper Rush under center, which has been encouraging. Obviously, that first game against the Eagles was a complete train wreck, but since then, you know, he's looked okay. They've changed their game plan a little bit. They've made the ADOT a lot lower, so they're getting the ball out super quick, which has led to a lot of like PPR friendly box scores for CeeDee Lamb. A little bit to the tight ends, of course, with Luke Schoonmaker, and then Rico getting the ball as a pass catcher. So that has worked for this offense. I do think this is a spot, though, where they could ride Rico and just kind of give him a bunch of touches. The Giants are dead last in yards per carry allowed. You know, they're bottom 10 in explosive rush rate. I'm also on, like, how much does this team care, you know, watch with the Giants at this point on a short week. You got players calling out Dable in the locker room. Like, it does kind of feel like a good spot to say, if ever there was a game on the Cowboys schedule for them to get a lead, feed Rico, you know, 15, 16, 17 carries. Like, this does feel like that spot. So I think Rico is, relatively speaking, good chalk, but I would not be surprised, and nobody should be surprised, right, if he gives you like a 16 for 82, you know, no touchdown stat line. Like, that's definitely possible. So he is fadeable on the slate for sure. I do think, though, price adjusted, he is a pretty good play.
Yeah, I think if I'm looking to get different in this game, Tyrone Tracy on the other side is a good price point pivot. I know that he's fumbled.
That little PPP.
Yeah, it's a good PPP right here. He only played 41% of the snaps last week. And Singletary got the goal line carry, got the touchdown. But Tracy is a pass catcher, and we care about that on full PPR. So yeah, at 5,800, he's not going to get clicked nearly as much as Rico Dowdle, probably even less than half of that. So I think Tracy's interesting leverage in this game if you want to build backwards and go that direction. Do you think a lot of people will play Rico and CeeDee together?
Yes, I think they will. Because when you're looking at price adjusted, I think Rico is probably RB1 or 2 on the slate, and I think CeeDee is pretty clearly a wide receiver 1 price adjusted. Not that Amon-Ra can't beat him, but just like if you're clicking the buttons, you're like, I could save $700 here. I'll just drop down to CeeDee and feel pretty good about it. I think the field will do that a lot. So yes, I think the combination of Rico and Lamb together is going to be pretty popular.
That's an area to exploit if you're playing in a large field. It's just that if the field is going to do this a lot, if that combination is there together, you can get away from a little bit of roster percentage by playing CeeDee and Tracy or playing Rico and Malik. And so I think this game is going to work best as a correlation play if you want to do that and just kind of go across Rico and Malik. Wandale is maybe the most worthless player on the slate. He's not cheap enough. Like, he should be under 4K.
You're so mean,
and
man.
Yet, dude, Wandale, I don't know if you know the stats, my friend, but Wandale's on pace to see 138 targets this year. Hold on, let me just make sure this is right. Type in some numbers in. My TI-83 Plus calculator, hold on. Let me get out of my game. Okay, here we go. 681 yards. It's the most worthless. By the way, it's dead last among all wide receivers in receiving EPA. Apart from a touchdown, he's in no man's land. Nobody's going to click him. So if you want to get real weird off the board, it's Wandale. And now he's going to come back to bite me because I said that. But it's like, I'm not playing him. Tolbert is on the field, but also pretty worthless snaps. It's just a lot of cardio here, man.
Yeah. Tolbert is just out there for a good time. We're still waiting to see what is happening with Brandon Cooks. They opened his 21-day window last week. He was limited in practice this week and last week. So you'll see all this stuff in Best Plays, which, by the way, will be out tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, that'll be out Wednesday. So we'll have updated information in there for all you guys. But yeah, you know, the Dallas side is interesting because, like, their team total is solid. I think there's a chance they can win this game, obviously. And so I think there's probably a good chance one of their pieces is in the optimal if that happens, if that comes to fruition. But it's hard to tell yourself a story on like the ancillary pieces that aren't Rico or CeeDee. Schoonmaker's fine. That's just a punt option. It is worth noting, though, the Giants are number 1 in schedule adjusted points allowed to tight ends. Only saw 4 targets last week. So I think in general, like Rico and CeeDee are good plays here. I don't have a ton of interest personally in other options in this game, unless you're saying, look, I'm just going to play that stack, Cooper Rush, Rico Dowdle, and CD, and kind of get out of here. But yeah, I'm not messing around with the Jalen Brooks or chasing Kevontae Turpin, anything like that. I think it's pretty straightforward who the plays are on the Cowboys.
On the Giants side, I think Neighbors is in a great spot at 7,100. You can add the squeaky wheel stuff that you saw after the game last week, but he's second in expected fantasy points per game this year among wide receivers, and you've had some relative duds over the last month and a half. So I think this sets up really, really well. The Cowboys are a pass funnel and a run funnel, so you can kind of do both if you want. 31st in EPA per pass attempt, dead last in fantasy points per dropback using man coverage. So Neighbors is interesting. I trying to go other places. I always have a soft spot in my heart for Darius Slayton because I feel like the team hates him, but I think he's actually a fine NFL wide receiver. Theo Johnson runs routes, and they're also worthless. So I don't really want to go there either. So I'm just not stacking up these quarterbacks at all. So then it's just a correlation play.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We got to talk about the quarterback. Tommy Cutlets, unfortunately, is limited in practice because of a forearm injury. Took some
sad,
massive hits this past Sunday against the Bucks. I sent you the clip. There was one where I didn't think he was going to get up. The offensive line is obviously a train wreck. His sack rate is a train wreck. I could definitely see the Giants going on the road here, and you don't need anybody from this team. That said, I love betting on just talented players. Malik Neighbors is one of the best wide receivers in the league. He's calling out his head coach as a rookie in the locker room. I think he's going to get absolutely peppered here. So when you think about roster percentages, CD is going to be number 1, I think. Number 2 might be Amon-Ra. Neighbors is obviously not going to be unowned or whatever on this slate, but relatively speaking from the high price guys, he's definitely going to be 3rd. And that to me feels like a good spot to attack. So I like Neighbors quite a bit. I don't think you have to stack him with Cutlets or Drew Lock. You can if you want to. But to me, my personal stance in this game is going to be let's go overweight Malik Neighbors. I think he's going to get peppered here.
Yeah, I like that take. I mean, I liked Cutlets because he ran for 32 yards last week. Let me be honest. I don't like Cutlets. I don't like his shtick. I didn't like him.
That's his nickname. There's no first name anymore. It's just Cutlets. I mean, you can do that because, you guys are Italian.
I mean, yeah. And now I'm actually standing up for the dude, which I didn't think I would, but ran for 32 last week. The Cowboys have allowed the second most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks and 6.5 rushing fantasy points per game. So just 6.5 just from fantasy points alone to quarterbacks. And at 4,500, that's awesome. If I knew he was playing, I'd be a little bit more interested if you wanted to stack him up with Neighbors and then play Rico on the other side. Cool with me. But I think this is a game where the field's not going to go there. I just don't feel the need. If I knew there was passing volume for him or Cooper Rush, I would go there. I just don't think either team is going to have to do that in this game. The total kind of reflects that. So any last thoughts? Oh, I'll give you a dart throw in this game, though.
Oh, please.
Kevontae Turpin has had a touchdown last. No. Let me explain. If Cooks is out, he's going to get some playing time. And he has a 32% targets per out run against single high safety looks, with the Giants do a ton. You're asking for a big play. You're roping him in. If you want to play the Dallas defense, get that double points. A little 2-for-1 special.
Double dip.
Okay, now you with me?
I mean, that is a little, that's interesting.
It's a dart.
Yeah, it's probably not going to work. I personally don't think I'm going to mess around with that, but I get it.
Whoa.
I get it. I will say, I do kind of like Darius Slayton if Drew Lock starts, because Drew Lock will chuck it. I mean, he'll chuck it deep. And I think Slayton's pretty good. He's like a fine wide receiver 3 in the NFL. This team hates him. But Dallas has faced the 4th highest perimeter wide receiver target share in the league. They've allowed the 3rd highest yards per catch. Kind of sounds like a Slayton spot. Again, very likely to give you 0 points, but could give you 20.
I was thinking about how, the Giants clearly don't like him. For some reason, they keep bringing him back, but they don't like him. It would just be so weird if our company or just whoever you work for, they just kind of keep you around, but it's very well known. We hate you. We hate you so much, but we want you to stay around.
Imagine lunch breaks. Oh, that'd be awkward.
Yeah. Give me your Vegas take.
Oh, man. I don't want to lay points with Dallas. But it is Thanksgiving. They got the tradition. Tommy DeVito will take sacks. I'm going to lay it with Cowboys.
I am too. I think their defense is healthy enough for the first time in a while where they could actually get it done. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. We are back. We're going to talk through one more game of the Thanksgiving slate and then get to our Battle Royale, the night game. After you are completely stuffed, sitting on the couch, falling half asleep, your kids are like, I want to stay up. I don't have to go to school. This is the game. It's the Miami Dolphins at the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are 3.5-point home favorites, and the over-under is 47.5. The main piece of news that most people care about and that most people put in their algorithms and in their docs and their conditionally formatted spreadsheets is, can Tua finally figure out what it's like to throw a football when it's below 40 degrees? So Betz, give me the informed take here, because the narrative is people will run with that. I hate saying it as like a goofy one-off thing. People will use that this week in DFS. And I just usually just run away from those things and just say it's like a 4-game sample size. We can move forward. But I mean, I just also use a really small sample size with Kevontae Turpin. So what do I know?
Do these numbers fit my narrative? And if not, then they don't matter.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's everywhere. It's in every article you read. It's on every... They were talking about it this morning on Good Morning Football. Like, it's everywhere. It's on ESPN. It's everywhere. It's on Twitter. Tua in cold weather. It's not really a narrative. It has not been good. Straight up. He is 0-4 when games are 40 degrees or colder. 1-3 against the spread. The Dolphins averaging 16 points per game as a team in that split. Now, going even back to last year, the Dolphins were a team that would beat up on bad teams. Their offense would roll, embarrass teams, and then kind of struggle when they face good competition. So I do think there are paths, obviously, where the Dolphins fail on this slate. But I worry that the field is going to double or even triple count that when you're looking at the roster percentages. And on a small slate, like, what if the Lions are good, but, they don't score 40, they score like 24 or 27. And like you need a piece or two and it's fine. And the Cowboys game hits the under. It's like, what if this is the game that pops off? I think that's definitely possible. And when you think about how the field is going to play it, they are not going to play Tua stacks. So yes, I am very interested in fading the narrative. I will say across the portfolio of lineups, if you're doing 20 max or a 150, like I'm certainly building some that fit that narrative of like, yeah, Tua fails here and the Packers run away with it. But there's going to be a portion of my lineups dedicated to, Tua double stacks and just hoping this game goes off.
You can look at this from a couple ways, because like, let's say he does lose this game. Okay, you go 0-5. Everyone's like, oh, see, it's the cold. What if we also just look at the fact that the Packers at home this year in Lambeau are number one versus quarterbacks and number one versus wide receivers when it comes to fantasy points allowed? Like, that's another part of this that we can add into the equation to say this is a tough matchup for anybody to trying to go into Lambeau and win. So I think my contrarian nature wants to look at ways to play the Dolphins. And I think Achane's going to be a popular play. I think Jonnu's going to be a popular play. And I think Tyreek's going to get some roster percentage because of the Bill Butler special. I mean, that's why most people are clicking the button. So I think Tua is the piece, though, that's going to be the lowest rostered. So it's one of those things. Can you soak up the Dolphins' from just finding the two pieces, Achane and Jonnu, or, Achane and Tyreek, and then you're fine. Like, you don't need Tua. And I think that's what we've seen in their games where they've been scoring a lot. Like, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Like, since Tua's been back, they've scored 27, 27, 23, 34, and 34. So the points have been there for the team, but he's been just meh for fantasy. I mean, even the last 2 weeks, he's thrown 7 touchdowns. It's been fine. So do you need Tua on this slate? And at $6K, that's pretty cheap.
I don't think you necessarily need him, even if this game stays close and the Dolphins win. I don't think he's necessarily guaranteed to be a part of stacks. I just think you could include him because the field almost certainly is not going to, if that makes sense. So, yeah, and it is worth noting, like, the Packers have kind of morphed into a run funnel recently. Since week 8, they are 27th in EPA against the run. They are 8th in dropback. So it's a pretty tough matchup for Tua and the pass catchers here. But like I said, I think the field's going to double and triple count the weather thing. And it's a small slate. And he still has some of the most explosive playmakers in the league at his disposal. And this Dolphins offense, like you said, has been awesome. They're 4-1 to the over since he returned. They're averaging 29 points per game. They're 6th in scoring and 5th in EPA per play. So if the field is not going to play that offense just because of, 25-degree temperatures, I would love to just play it in a tournament and hope that in a 1-game sample, it works out. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
I think it just starts with Achane just because of how good he's been. And JJ Zacharyson pointed this out, but he's approaching what CMC did last year on a PPR points per game level in 7-2 a start. So I like Achane because I think you're going to continue to get some passing work. So he profiles as maybe one of the highest floor plays on this slate. You just look at him and just think of the usage. They're not really running a lot of 2 running back sets. Remember last year it was like Mostert and Achane were on the field together. They've been doing more 2 tight end sets, and that's why Jonnu has been on the field a ton and loose. So I think Achane is a play that I'm going to meet the field at because he's just a good play, and he's been a good play for a while. And then figure out how I want to attack with Tyreek and Waddle. Like with Tyreek, where are you at on his like injury stuff? Because I haven't really dove too deep on it. I've just been looking more at, just raw numbers. But do you think that's affecting him?
It shouldn't be affecting him at all from a separation standpoint or a route running standpoint. Obviously, it's his wrist. He just hasn't been getting as many looks as we're used to. So I don't think it's affecting him a ton in terms of his usage because it's not like he's dropping like wide open passes or anything like that. And in like pregame warmups, he's like catching the ball behind his back and, one-handed catches with his left wrist, which is the injured one. So I don't think it's a huge thing. I just think the offense is so different this year. Like the reason we loved 2 doubles last year is because it was Tyreek and it was Waddle and it was nobody else. Now you've got Jonnu popping up for a massive role. Devon Achane is basically a wide receiver. They're even getting like Odell Beckham a couple targets here and there. Malik Washington will get like 1 or 2 end arounds, so all the guys are getting touches. Even Jalen Wright gets a couple every game now too. So yeah, I don't think the wrist really is affecting his usage. I think it's just a matter of the weapons stepping up behind him.
Factoring in salary, do you feel like Waddle is a better play at 5,400 than Tyreek is at 6,900?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that.
I mean, it might just be a coin flip.
Yeah, I think when you adjust for salary, that makes sense. I do worry about just chasing Waddle's big game when he's literally given us, 9 in a row of nothing, and all of a sudden has a massive game. It does kind of feel like that could flip back to Tyreek. Obviously, you're paying for it, but that's kind of my initial thought.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the splits of what the Packers play a lot this year. They run a lot of cover 2, cover 6, so a lot of like don't beat a steep, and it's been Achane as the premier guy that Tua is targeting in those looks, and then it's Waddle. So I don't know, like I think it's just kind of obvious of like who the plays are. I mean, Jonnu's a great play at his price. Like if he was the tight end 1 on the slate and he's $5,000, we'd be like, man, you could probably fade Jonnu. But at 4,300, like he's better than all these other wide receivers that we're trying to fit in our lineups. Like look at all the wide receivers that are in the 4K range. I mentioned Wandale. No, thank you. Brandon Cooks isn't going to play. Dobbs probably isn't going to play. Your boy Darius Slayton. So it's like at that price point, I'd rather pay for Jonnu than trying to pay for some of these wide receivers in another spot. Like I could see people flexing Jonnu as kind of that late night hammer. I think he's a really, really good play. And
I think he is too.
Kind of shown it. Cool. Let's go to the Packers side. So I've been all about making sure I understand how this team wants to play. And when they're ahead and in the first half, they're the most run-heavy team and one of the slowest teams in football. So if you think that game flow is the Packers get the lead, Josh Jacobs is going to be the play. He's going to stick out. He's going to be very, very popular in builds like that. I think everyone wants to figure out the wide receiver room. With Dobbs out, it's like, okay, well, now we get more snaps for Wicks, and Wicks is always targeted, but he never catches any of them. And Watson, we've seen have big games, and we all love Reed. So how are you sorting things out? And is it just like, man, I think it's just Jacobs is the best play?
I think he's the most likely from you play this slate 100 times. He's probably the one you need, 60% of the time or something. But when you look at this team, like just like you said, how they want to play, they want to run the ball. They are right now 31st in pass rate over expectation over the last 4 games played. Only the Eagles are more run heavy. So you look at that, they're at home. They get the Lambeau advantage in the cold weather. Like you can tell yourself a pretty easy story how the game goes in favor of Green Bay and they have to give the ball to Jacobs another, 20, 22 times. I could certainly see that. So if I'm not going to play that route because I think that's what the field might do and I want to get a little different, I would correlate this game as if it goes off because I think Jordan Love needs to be pushed in order to have massive ceiling. I mean, he can be efficient. He can get there that way. But just from a pass attempts standpoint, they're going to limit his dropbacks and pass attempts if they can. But if he's pushed, he will throw. We've seen those games before. So to me, if I'm playing a Jordan Love double, I definitely want like a Tyreek, a Waddle on the other side to like speed the game up, if that makes sense. I don't think that this is like an onslaught situation for me the way I think it could be for Detroit.
Jordan Love is averaging 261 passing yards and 2.6 passing touchdowns this year at home in Lambeau. I think he's a really good play at 6,300. And we've seen him have these games where he gets these multi-touchdowns, runs a little bit as well. So I think Love double stacks are in play for me from a tournament perspective. And if you want to bring it back with Achane or Tyreek, I like that. Like if you want to go overweight this game, I think that there's going to be enough roster percentage that's kind of spaced out between Reed, Watson, Wicks, and Kraft that if you pick the right two with Jordan Love, and then you are overweight this game compared to the Lions game, then you already have enough leverage that you can just play chalk everywhere else. Just play Rico, play all the other guys, play Gibbs, and you're totally fine. You can get there in this game. So I like Love a lot. I'll probably be overweight him. Like if I'm picking two quarterbacks on this slate, I think Love is my favorite to be overweight. I like the contrarian nature of sticking it to the cold weather narrative. And then with Tua. And then from there, it's like, I guess I'm building a backdoor Caleb garbage time stack.
I think that's fair. I definitely like getting into this game more than I think the field is going to. That's kind of my general stance is like overweight Lions, maybe throw in a couple darts in the early games to like see if you need a late swap and see how different you got early on. That's another thing to consider this game for is late swap. But I definitely want to play this game as if it goes over the total because I think everybody just pictures Lambeau, cold weather. Like it's definitely going to be a snoozer. It's definitely going to be a Jacobs game. I think that's what the field already assumes. I can't tell you how many times on Twitter I've seen like, Tua and like the 3 downward trend chart emojis in cold weather games. It's everything people's talking about. So I'll just hope that doesn't happen in this game and hope I pick the right 2 Packers wide receivers, which I can't tell you who they are, but I'll mix and match across lineups and hope. It is worth noting Miami gives up a ton of deep plays in the past game. So it kind of feels like a Christian Watson special to me, especially as leverage off of Dontavian Wicks.
Yep, I like that a lot. I can see the late swap option. You look at some of these combinations, like Wicks and Jonnu are roughly the same amount. I mean, you look at Achane and Josh Jacobs, like there's going to be a lot of different stuff of where people go in that late option, and that's going to decide the slate is who of those 2 running backs goes off, Achane and Jacobs. And then on top of that, did you pick the right Packers wide receivers? So any last thoughts on the game?
I don't think so.
All right, give me your Vegas take.
I will take, at 3.5, I will take the Dolphins.
I will too. And I want Tua to win this game. Like I really do. I think the Packers are a great team, well coached. I respect them a lot. They need my respect, by the way. I mean, that means a lot to them to hear
definitely.
from this podcast.
Definitely.
I was like, they don't give a crap about what I think. Yeah, but I'll take the Dolphins plus 3.5.
DFS Battle Royale.
All right, Don Julio himself is proud to sponsor this segment where Betz and I will be going back and forth talking about some lineups that we built. If you want to copy this lineup and enter it to the Millie Maker, go for it. We'll split it together. But this is just between Betz and I can't wait, man. That margarita, whew. It's just, I mean, I'm going to be wearing a suit to Chili's drinking this thing.
I kind of hope I lose now, and then you just get to go do that. Take a little selfie, put it on Twitter. Please do that.
Oh, yeah, and I'll be on the phone the entire time, just like making up stuff. Like I'm just this high-end guy just shipping stuff, exporting, importing, exporting everything, telling people like this has got to get out tomorrow. High-end guy.
I love that.
Chili's.
I love it.
Okay. At quarterback, I have Jordan Love at 6,300.
Okay. I went with the chalk cash quarterback. I did take Caleb at 5,300.
Oh, that makes me feel just great.
I'm terrified.
My football takes feel good. At running back, I have Jahmyr Gibbs at 7,500 and Rico Dowdle at 5,500.
I have both of them as well.
Okay. So that's fine. Totally fine. At wide receiver, I have somebody, let's see here. It's called the GOAT, Keenan Allen at 5,100. And then I have 2 Packers stacked with Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks.
Okay, this is where it's going to get different because I also have Keenan Allen, but I have CeeDee Lamb, and I do have Dontavian Wicks. So it sounds like you're going no CeeDee on this slate.
I am, and it makes me feel...
Oh, baby. CeeDee is going to absolutely bury you.
I freaking love CeeDee. All right, at tight end, I have Jonnu Smith.
As do I.
Okay, and so the flex, I think this is where we could get different, but I could be wrong. I have Devon Achane here.
I also have Devon Achane, and I've got the Cowboys defense.
I have the Lions defense. So
okay, there we go.
I think it's going to come down to what Caleb does in that game, and then my Packers with Jaden Reed.
Yep, those are the difference makers. Jaden Reed, CeeDee Lamb, and the quarterbacks and defense.
Okay, so you and I didn't talk about this. We just kind of made our lineups and said we would do it, but it seems like the chalkier plays, or at least the best plays, we kind of ended up together, and there's obviously lots of different routes here to go, but okay, feel pretty good. Feel not bad about that. But our best plays will be out on Wednesday. If you want to see those, we'll have them ranked for DraftKings and for FanDuel. And if you want to play with us, go to ballersdfs.com. It will direct you to our DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS, Borg Betz. You can join our Thanksgiving Day slate. We will also open up some tournaments for the weekend. And Betz, tell everyone goodbye.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Kyle and I are super thankful for you guys and thankful for what we get to do on this show. Enjoy the slate. Seriously hope you guys have a ton of fun, win some money. And we'll be back on Friday for another episode to preview Sunday's main slate. But good luck on Thursday. We'll catch you guys on Friday.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.